Hello, and welcome to the Sovereign Collective podcast, where we bring you real, raw truth for your self-empowerment. I'm your host, Sasha Kowalchuck, and I believe that you can stand on your own 2 feet, but that you don't have to do it alone. I love learning from people who continually strive to raise the bar, to go against mainstream thinking, and who dare to question the general consensus. People who risk being ridiculed or even risk the loss of their professional status as they bravely question the common narratives and challenge the rest of us to expand our minds and to reconsider what we think we already know. Join me in learning how to take control of your health and your mind so that you can have the energy to think more clearly and the confidence to step up and take responsibility for all aspects of your life. We promise to never censor here because I believe you are strong enough to hear the real, raw truth to make up your own mind. If you like what you find here at the Sovereign Collective podcast, then please share with your friends and family. And please also consider making a small donation on my Patreon page so that I can continue to bring you amazing content so that we can all create a better future. I so appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. And now, on to the show. Hi, everyone. It's Sasha Kowalchuck here with another episode of the Sovereign Collective podcast. And today we have a little bit different of a format for you, as you can see if you're watching this on video. Today, I'm here with my hubby, Tim, and I've got Katherine Kowalchuck and her partner, Mike Worthington, and we're going to have a discussion on current events. So we met Mike and Katherine at a rally a couple weeks ago here in Calgary, and Tim asked them if they'd be so kind to join us on a podcast. So the background of Katherine is law and of Mike is engineering, and together they've got a lot of information, a lot of research, a lot of curiosity that has put together a lot of information so that we could get into, what's going on in the world today and some of the truths behind what we are seeing out there and what we're not being told. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Katherine and Mike, and then we'll get into it. So Katherine has been practicing law in the Province of Alberta since 2003. She has worked in large national firms and smaller firms in Alberta. From 2010 to 2017, she had her own law firm. While Katherine's main focus is family law these days, given what is happening in our world, Katherine has turned her attention to uncover the implications of citizens' rights in the face of COVID-19. She and her partner, Mike Worthington, have been researching for years and have recently teamed up with other lawyers and professionals in the city of Calgary, and they call themselves Lawyers for Truth, and that's for the number 4. So you can go to lawyersfortruth.ca to find the information, and on Facebook as well, right? Mm-hmm. Lawyers for Truth's goal is to disseminate information about human rights and the lockdown restrictions, which are being ignored by our governments and mainstream media. Lawyers for Truth is not a law firm and does not offer legal advice. They are simply a resource for people to help them make sense of our world and put people in touch with various resources. And Mike. So Mike is a practicing professional engineer and business owner. Mike has been involved in construction, oil and gas, and research and development. Much of Mike's experience, including current work, involves reviewing published scientific papers and exploiting these learnings to increase corporate value for his clients. Mike has devoted much of his personal time to researching our current government policy decisions with respect to the available public statistical data, scientific research, historical information, and legal precedent. This body of research concludes that COVID-19 restrictions are not based on science, are a repeat of the failures of the 1918 H1N1 Spanish flu pandemic. We could talk about some of those similarities there, and that the restrictions are causing much more harm than any measurable benefit. For some reason, our government doesn't seem to see that. I don't know. I think I do. Mike teamed up with Lawyers for Truth to help put an end to the public policy disaster we are now living. So thank you, Katherine and Mike, for being here today. I really appreciate what you're doing and taking the time to speak with us
Thanks
today.
for having us. Yeah, we're excited about
All
this.
pleasure. Thank you. So where should we start? So why don't you just tell us a little bit more about the organization? So you're both involved with that organization, right?
Yeah, this really the genesis came from actually that same rally that we met at a few weeks ago in Calgary. And we approached Doris Reimer, who is part of, was one of the lawyers that was speaking that day about the human rights implications that are being violated currently right now with these restrictions. And so she knew some people and I knew some people. We gathered everybody together. And we all decided that, we needed to do something, and we felt kind of powerless because to some extent, because there are other groups doing things, which is great. But they are either so far down the road doing some things, and we just thought, well, we would take a different slant to it, which is not necessarily going out, although we do support the rallies and we have been attending the rallies. We thought we could channel our collective knowledge into information and help point people into the right direction in terms of resources and how to make sense of things and give people an outlet to vent, because I think a lot of people are waking up right now to this information, and I suspect that something is wrong, and it's very therapeutic to be able to talk with other people who are very like-minded, right, especially with respect to what we're going through. And so I don't know where it's going to go, to be honest. All I know is that we want to get as much information out there as possible. For some reason, lawyers and engineers and other professionals do have, right or wrong, a certain image and reputation. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but there is some sort of deference given, I think, to people who are professionals. And so for whatever reason, we hope that we can, have these conversations with people. We are, I believe, intelligent. We have years of experience in going through school. We have years of life experience, both in work and, just living life as well. And so I think it's important for people to see that people who are educated can think critically, and we're not necessarily tinfoil hat like we've been labeled. We're not necessarily people who you would typically stereotype as a conspiracy theorist, right? And that's such a popular term these days. We're just like average everyday people who want to understand what is going on. And when we hear a collective message being echoed throughout the world, when we see what is happening with the violation of our human rights, having to wear a mask, locking down, having businesses destroyed, families being destroyed, we need to do something about it.
Right. And you're seeing firsthand families coming apart. You being in family law, you've seen that impact your own, like from your perspective.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that? I'm assuming you're getting a direct example of that in your own practice.
I am. I do practice family law, and I do mostly divorces and separations and child access and that spousal support and all that kind of stuff. And I've been busier probably in the last 3 months than I probably have with divorce for a very long time.
Wow. Yeah. So that just goes to show, the stress that I think are on people. Right?
Interesting coincidence, if nothing else.
Yeah.
If you believe in coincidence.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And for some reason, there don't seem to be a lot of professionals speaking up, in my opinion. And people say, oh, they're getting threatened, or they're going to have their license revoked, or things like that. And I just feel like, for me, I understand you need to feed your family. You have to, you need your paycheck. But I don't understand if do these people not know, or they're just pretending, or I don't know how you live with yourself if you just comply when you know that something stinks. So are you seeing many other people in both in the engineering world and in the law world? Are you seeing many people standing up, many questioning, or are you guys few?
I would say we're few. I think that I work in a smaller firm, so my sample size of colleagues right now that I immediately work with is quite small. But having said that, people think that this is crap, bullshit. They really are not, they don't understand it. The rules are arbitrary. There seems to be no rhyme or reason to them. And so they question it. But there was an article a couple of months ago that described us as cynical spreaders. What was the other one? Had us lumped into like
us being lawyers for truth?
No, I forget what article it was, and so I probably shouldn't reference it. But anyway, the article labeled people who are anti-maskers, or I guess
Right,
it's
labelists.
right, as like we are,
Yeah,
the COVID spreaders, right? We're cynical spreaders, and then
Right.
there's a big, I think, part of the population, from what I can gather, is going along to get along, and
Right.
I get that, and then there's a big part of the population as well. I think less though than the two combined that I just mentioned, that are believing exactly what the government is telling them, what the health officials are telling them, and not questioning it. And I think that's a byproduct of years of being manipulated. And that's the why that I think we want to get into later on in our conversation, that a lot of people don't or cannot hear. They can't get to that point because it is very dark, and there's been a targeted campaign to label it all as conspiracy theorists, to in an effort to discredit right off the giddy up before any information is uttered. Right. So, so I think people are, from my experience, people are not in agreement with this, but they are going along to get along.
Well, I think they genuinely have some idea that if they go along, that it will all of a sudden be over.
Well, that's what they think, but
like
clearly it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve, which ended up being now 9 months, right? And so, and
now until the end of
December 2021, which is really miraculous. And in fact, I was reading the Public Health Act the other day.
So just to interrupt, masking bylaw has been extended in Calgary to December 2021. So somehow they have a crystal ball letting us know that for the next year, we're going to be required to have a mask for our protection, or for your protection.
Yeah, it's quite ridiculous, actually. And when I was reading the Public Health Act, which adopted, as you know, Bill 10 of earlier this year came into effect, which gave the government sweeping powers with respect to this pandemic. It's interesting that a lot of what was enacted is miraculously going to be repealed on its own in December 2021. So, like when you connect the dots on all this, you wonder, well, that's kind of convenient. City of Edmonton has a mask bylaw until December 2021, Calgary, the Public Health Act. So I don't know. Do you believe in coincidences?
Not me.
Right?
I've done way too much study on too many different areas to believe in coincidence, right? Someone said to me, I don't have the luxury of denial when I was suggesting, because when we have a little bit different styles when we're talking about this, I'm very much about seeing how I can keep the conversation open, because I think that's one of the most dangerous things that's happened is the denial of conversation, right? And the demonizing of conversation, and having healthy, spirited debate about different ideas, and that's not okay. And it's not only not okay, it's being censored. And the funny thing is anybody who isn't aware, like if they're just like going on the mainstream things, they'll never know how much stuff is actually being censored on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on whatever, right? On Twitter. There's heaps and heaps and heaps. Like I don't know how many things do you think you've actually seen that have been actually pulled off of those platforms? Tons and tons.
Like we're censored all the time.
Yeah.
Or fact checked or whatever it is. This is or like you're in violation of our community standards.
Even if you're reporting data, like actual
from
data,
the
like
CDC,
here's the CDC
WHO.
data. Here's something from the FDA, here's from the NIH or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Any of them, and you can pull up the document and you can show it, and there it is. And if it's not in alignment with the mainstream narrative, then somehow it's being
fact checked. You're representing it wrong.
It's being represented as false information, right?
If people want more information on what is being censored and how it's being done and why, there's an excellent piece in the British Journal of Medicine. So it's a very reputable journal. And it talks specifically about who and why science is being censored. So that would include your data. And it's quite explicit. So they describe a profit motive to censoring the data.
Yeah, well, that would make sense. Can can we actually hook up with you after and get links to something like that?
Sure, that's also on the Lawyers for Truth Facebook.
Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
is it- it's on-
Lawyers
oh,
for
it's on
Truth
the-
on the
okay.
Facebook.
On the
We
Facebook.
can
On the
provide it. We
Facebook
can
page.
provide all the
Okay.
links
Awesome.
for follow-up to.
Yeah, that'd be good to
yeah.
put in the show notes, and
Yeah.
people can
We'll
check
do
it out
that.
for themselves, because
Yeah.
people are they're gonna believe whatever they believe, and there's gonna be, without even knowing us as people or having one single discussion about it, there's gonna be judgment on the fact that this conversation is even happening.
Totally.
Right.
And I think, the real solution is simply the willingness to engage your reading comprehension skills while still in control of your cognitive dissonance. So we all have a vested interest in not knowing this.
Mhm.
None of us want to deal with the betrayal and lies that have been promulgated by our governments, health services, and the media. But that doesn't make it less true. And so that might seem inflammatory if you're uninformed, but really that's all that's required. And even the science on masks is very, very plain and simple. They don't work. So the very premier studies are called a randomized controlled trial, or a randomized clinical trial with laboratory confirmed results, all of which show that masks do not work, and any benefit is within statistical error or the error bar of the study. And now some of these studies have been very, very large to try to quantify what that benefit may or may not be. What's also important is that in another randomized controlled trial, they found that cloth masks increase infection rate.
Bacterial infection rate.
All infection.
All infection rate.
So they did an all infection rate. So there's also clinical trials that show masks increase the likelihood of an influenza-like illness. So it's not just bacteria. So if you talk about what damages can be or harmed to people and what they are, one of them is called maskne. So people are experiencing abrasion, bruising, and then also fungal or bacterial infection. One is like a yeast infection on your face. The other is called mask mouth. And so dentists, one of the primary dentists that's showing this is a guy in New York who's had clients that he's had for years and years with no medical issues in their mouth. Now, what he's seeing is a rise in halitosis, gum disease, tooth decay. And what we do know is that tooth decay is also linked to stroke. So these things left unchecked will lead to serious issues. So,
and yet now we're lobbying here in Calgary to put fluoride back in the water because coincidentally, there's an uprise in the decay of,
or they're just choosing the time because everybody's preoccupied, so you can't think about fluoride because you got so many other things to worry about. Like,
fair enough. Well, it's an interesting coincidence, if nothing else.
It is an interesting coincidence. So many coincidences. Yes. So you've been doing obviously you've been spending your time doing a lot of research.
Yes.
Correct. So where have you been going and what have you been finding? So for somebody that might be new to this, what would be some points of interest? So the mask. So some people. So what do you say? What would you say to me when it's like, well, I listened to the science, and the science clearly shows that the masks are working. Are people seeing some kind of fake studies? Are they just using that word science and not?
What they're hearing is, so you would have like a clinical trial or observational study. So there's a pyramid on our Facebook page, Lawyers for Truth Facebook page, and it describes the quality of scientific data. Mm-hmm. So at the bottom of the pyramid are these clinical trials and observational studies. So you're basically interviewing people, talking to them, getting feedback. And then based upon that data that you've collected, and they're not to be downplayed because these are oftentimes doctors doing this. And so it is valid to some degree. The challenge is that it's not randomized, so it's subject to bias, and there's no lab confirmation. So someone could say, no, I didn't get sick, but they did get sick. Or they did get sick, but they really believe that they were healthy through it. So they'd say, well, no, I wasn't sick.
Right.
So it makes the results speculative. So in oil and gas, like I relate it to oil and gas, those data are like geology and seismic. So you can collect this data, and you have experts looking at this data, and they really do work hard, and they really do believe in the data, what it can tell. So they interpret it. And so they'll say, drill here, because I believe there's oil there based on this data and this interpretation. And sometimes there's oil and sometimes there's not.
Right.
The studies, if you want to know if there actually is oil there, are the randomized controlled trials or the randomized clinical trials with lab confirmed results. So we've drilled that well, the Mask well. There was no oil there. They don't work. They do not work.
Okay, right. I think somebody was quoting, I think it was Simone Gold who did the America's Frontline Doctors she was referring to. Before March 2020, there was not one study that showed efficacy of masks and viral.
Well, we know
Didn't exist.
we know that this is not about. It's not about health, and it's not about whether the mask works to prevent a virus that whose survival rate is 99.7%, right? So it's not about that. And even early on, you had, people, experts like Dr. Fauci in the United States and Dr. Tam in Canada, both advocating or suggesting that masks were not necessary. It has nothing, the mask wearing has nothing to do with it. But for people who either don't want to pay attention to it, can't be bothered, or too busy in their life is falling apart, they don't have time to research all of this, because the media is working hand in glove with the governments, and we are just getting whatever the official narrative is. And so that information is not going to be found on your fingertips, and it's not going to come up in the first 3 searches or first page of Google, because Google is part of it. And so,
anybody who has any questions about that, you'll have to watch Social Dilemma, which is on
exactly, and even social,
Netflix.
and that show is.
But they didn't bring up Google, I don't think. They didn't bring up one, but they talk about Facebook.
But the point is, all it does is it brings forward the artificial intelligence algorithms that are more about what can sell to you or what you have interest in than what's actually available.
Well, and I found because I'd been told to watch Social Dilemma for quite some time, and I don't have a Netflix account anymore after the Cuties stuff that came out earlier this year, so we don't subscribe anymore. However, we found it on BitChute, and we watched it finally just recently, and I found it quite interesting because the examples that they use for, confirmation bias and all the rest of it seem to be conspiracy theories.
Absolutely.
Right? However, what the person who is not a conspiracy theorist wouldn't suspect is that they're getting duped with the information that they're curating with however they're searching or whatever they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And so what I've found recently, and more so it was plain for me this year, is that people are operating in silos. They're not connecting the dots, right? So, for instance, there's people out there that are very vocal about how I don't trust the government and they're crap and they're ruining and whatever. And so, about the economy, I don't trust Justin Trudeau's got to go, whatever. And then you say, okay, well, do you trust them? No, I don't. I said, well, why do you trust them about this COVID?
Yeah.
And then I get a flat
total
response.
disconnect, right?
I'm like, and so that's what's really interesting to me. And the psychological, they call it a psychological operation for a reason, right? And it's actually, and I described it yesterday, as heartbreaking. What I see right now is just heartbreaking, because I can't believe where we're at. And I actually don't think that this is going to get much better. I think it's going to get quite a bit worse. Now, I don't want to have that energy out there, but, at the same time, when you look around, we were only supposed to be locked down for 2 weeks. And 9 months later, we have a mask mandate that's going to extend until at least December 2021, right? So...
And people are happy about it, and they want it, and they're asking for it.
Oh, I know.
Right. So, okay. So if it's not about the health, what is it about? So Fauci, Tam, everyone, oh no, it's just, Fauci says, if anything, you're making somebody else feel better. The mask, it doesn't really do anything. So why the mask mandate? Let's talk about what.
Well, before we go there.
Okay.
There's a lot of people that are saying this and spouting this idea, this theorem, that the mask protects others.
Right.
Well, that-
Okay.
Yeah, I don't wear the mask to protect me. I wear it to protect you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that is categorically false.
Okay.
That is not the case. So you can find trials where they've done this, and with the masks, when you breathe out, the majority of the airflow goes beside a mask.
Mhm.
And with cloth masks, in fact, you have increased aerosols. So aerosols are the particles that are in the air and they flow like a fluid. So they're governed by fluid dynamics. They're not spit that's going to come out and fall.
Right.
And they can float for up to 16 hours. There's been a study that has shown them in
16
the air for
hours.
16 hours.
Wow.
So if you're in a building where everyone's breathing out the side of their mask and you have a central HVAC system, you're exposed. We're all exposed. It's too late. The masks don't work, and that's been proven. And this idea that you're protecting someone else, although it's a very nice thing to feel, perhaps, it's just simply not true. It's not true. And the only studies that show that are observational in nature, and there's no actual determination of that. And the only determination of that is actually the opposite.
Well, further to that, my mother and father, bless them, they're down, on kind of our side and have come to realize that all of this is just nonsense. They've, done their own advocacy work for themselves and have written their city councilors, their MLAs, the premier, etc. And my mom and dad, one of them wrote to Councillor Sutherland in Calgary to ask about what justifies this mask bylaw. And this was early on. And the response that we received, or they shared with us, was that this was just because most constituents wanted it because it would make them feel better. So
that was right in the Public Health Act.
Oh, right.
That little, no, it wasn't the Public Health Act. It was the AHS document.
Well, it's very plain. This is not about science. Yeah. It's about making people feel better. And they are contributing somehow to, saving lives when that is not actually the case. And further to the point where they all cause deaths for the same time period right now as in previous years is not very much different.
No.
The only difference in the all-cause death data is the timing of it. And what you see not only here, but anywhere where these draconian measures came in, the lockdowns, that is where you see this spike in death rate. But the all-cause death totals on a monthly basis or annualized basis are absolutely no different.
Absolutely no different.
Which I'm actually surprised because considering the overdoses and the suicides, I would think there would be a little bit more, but for totally different reasons.
Yeah, the 0 to 45 year group is higher than normal, and so that could account for that. But there is a group. The newly retired group, so the 45 to 65 kind of range, or 45 to 70, something like that. I can't remember the exact digits, but it's right from the Canadian Stats Canada death database. You can go and get it. You can analyze the data yourself, put in a spreadsheet, and you can figure this all out. But there is the newly retired are doing quite well this year. They have less deaths than normal.
Less deaths than normal, 45 and up.
And then there's the black sheep or the pink elephant or the gorilla in the room, whatever you want to call it, is about Sweden. We just actually looked at the numbers this morning of all-cause mortality in Sweden. The country where they're like, oh my goodness, they didn't lock down, and now cases are going up and whatever, which means nothing. By the way, my own thing about cases simply means a positive PCR test, not a case of an infectious individual. Well, but if I'll just finish on the Sweden numbers, it's actually been, the deaths have been trending down. And as of December 4th, 2020, they were only at 82,000 and change, where in the previous years it was like 87, 90, 91, 92. It's kind of been about that way since 2000.
Date? But that was for the whole year.
It was for the whole year.
Yeah.
So we still have
a little bit
granted,
to go.
There's 3 weeks to go in that data until it all comes to fruition. But it's unlikely that I would think that all of a sudden there's going to be 40,000
it's certainly not going to be indicative of a pandemic.
Or something like that.
So when we looked at the data, we tore it into the first 38 weeks because that's the data we had. So all the data that we analyzed is time normalized data. So we take out all of that idea that there's more deaths to the end of the year. When we look at the
based
data,
on
it
up
tells
to
that same
38
story.
weeks.
Up to
was
30. So you measure
information.
38 to 38.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Exactly.
And so if you wanted to calm people down, you would just tell them that this scenario this year with this woohoo flu is the same, and maybe not quite even as bad as 2018. And if you remember 2 years ago, I don't remember the flu season being particularly bad. Yet this woohoo flu is, in the statistics themselves, the same as.
Right.
Now, the timing of those deaths has changed, and it changed relative to the lockdown. The lockdown killed a lot of people. I believe when you lock people into long-term care facilities, first and foremost, and you don't let them go to the hospital to get treatment when they're dying, they die. Where if they go to the hospital, they would survive more.
Right.
So one of the things,
And that's just on a mechanical level.
that's very mechanical.
Yeah.
Very mechanical. And then so right now where we have more people in ICUs and more hospitalizations, well, there's a lot of people who got very upset about that. Because a lot of these people didn't have non-resuscitation orders. Like, they're meant to be saved.
Yes.
And they were locked into these long-term care facilities to die. So that has been changed. So now these people, if they don't have a do not resuscitate order, they are being allowed to go to the hospital. So yes, of course hospitalization is up, and of course there's more people in ICU, but nothing above normal.
No,
And
there was that
that's
nurse.
the thing that's not being said by public officials. Now it's being said by nurses all around.
Yes.
The ICUs are busy because they're always
Because they're
busy at
always
this
busy.
time of the year. Nothing
Yeah.
out of the ordinary, nothing to, but yet we hear there's hallway medicine and there's no beds and there's always hallway medicine, right? We're not seeing anything out of the ordinary. And the fact that we're even debating that there's a pandemic, doesn't that make people question, is there really a pandemic? Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be very obvious?
Well, just think about it. Like, this is the first time in my life where you've turned on the news and they were reporting entire how total deaths each day.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
have we ever done that for anything?
Or when
Right?
when
So-
every mainstream media is cheerleading government position.
Exactly. Right. So,
Yeah.
like, if we had focused, of course, this is all new information because we've never been told every day how many people died from the flu. Like,
Right.
We've never been told
We've
that.
never told every
Yeah.
day. Exactly.
So,
or cases,
you know,
cumulative number that just keeps getting bigger
You hear
and
about
bigger.
a car accident here or, like
Right.
whatever, but you don't hear of, statistical deaths reported daily.
And it's what they open the news with every time.
Exactly.
Right?
But up until 2020, what a case was when a doctor saw someone, diagnosed something.
Right.
That's what I was going to mention.
If he was uncertain of his diagnosis or wanted confirmation because this or t'other might have meant a different protocol, then he would get a lab test to confirm which it was. This is the first time where we're using a lab test only and calling that a case and assuming it's an infection. That is not medical science. That
even
is
cases-
something else.
And all even cases are the 20 other kids that were in the class with one that was
Of course,
confirmed
right,
positive as
contact
well.
traced, yeah.
Right? Like the
Yeah.
cases, I remember they were saying, we were listening to something ages ago, and like for every
Yeah.
actual
It's
case,
county-
which is
county
questionable in
Texas.
its own right, based on the test that's being used, there was on average 15
Probably.
assumed cases that were lumped in with cases.
Yeah.
And they did not decipher between the two,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Yeah, they literally do not matter. There was a great article that described these cases and this case count and the PCR related positive tests as scientifically useless. Like, it is literally useless information.
Yeah.
except for forensics, which is why it was created.
Well, it
in
is
the
a
first
good
place.
test.
Right.
But
Yeah,
not
but-
for diagnosing it.
Exactly. It produces more genetic material from a small sum very effectively.
Well, and don't you, and further to Mike's point, what I find about, we were talking about this the other day, like they have removed doctors from the equation. Just as Mike pointed out, like normally you would go see a doctor, you would get a test to confirm a potential diagnosis that would be done in the laboratory. And then you could, you have somebody reviewing, understanding your personal history and going through that with you to be confirmed by a laboratory result. Well, the doctors have been removed. Well, why have they been removed from that process? Is it expediency? Is it because they don't want us to know something? So we heard something secondhand recently that apparently has from a doctor in Edmonton, and this doctor has disclosed that their directive from AHS is to not give out any information when requested. So I haven't determined, like I haven't been able to validate it, but I have no reason to think, based on my source, that that would be information that is false. So why are they doing that, right? But I can talk about my own experience because I have a mask exemption. I went in July and I spoke with my doctor, my GP, for an hour about this issue. And what I took from that conversation, I did get a mask exemption. But what I did take from that was that she, at that time in July, now this is early on the heels of the August 1st mask mandate, they're afraid. They don't want to get sued. They don't want any liability. They're afraid for their jobs and they don't want to come out. And so there you have it. Like, it is not about what is, and I've heard anecdotally from other people as well, having conversations with other people about all this shenanigans, that there are being people going to get a mask exemption. The doctors are telling them, no, we're being told not to
give exemption. Yeah. And that, like, for me, that's just grounds for malpractice. Like, that's negligence.
I agree.
If you are an individual, we all have our own personal stories and histories and problems and health concerns. Like, to flat out say no exemptions being given out, it doesn't make any sense. I've talked to so many people that are suffering from it, where they have lung issues, they have anxiety issues, they've had past trauma issues. It's absolutely insane.
Well, and a lot of people say, like the NDP always says on their Facebook, this is not a political statement, it's a mask. And every single time I write, yes, it is a political statement and a mask. And every time I just get like reamed out for like days from the NDP. And look, I'm without party. Like, I don't have an affiliation to any party. And I will agree and support people who use common sense and logic as part of their decision making and policy making. But this I cannot get behind. And it is not about health. This is about muzzling people. And the thing where I am sickened every day when I see everybody with a mask on, because I don't wear a mask, I have an exemption, and I assert that as often as I possibly can. So regardless, I just see that it's such a description of, like, it's so symbolic of, really what I feel that they're telling us is just shut up, don't ask any questions, and stay at home. Like, they don't want us intermingling like this. They don't want us having conversations about anything like this, because I know in my heart, and I just feel in my heart that they know that, this house of cards is going to fall, because people are standing up. So people like Rocco Galati in Ontario, people like John Carpe in Alberta with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and others all around the world and in Canada are bringing applications because they understand that our rights are being violated, right? And the Constitution allows for an infringement on one's rights, but it has to be reasonable and they have to demonstrate it. And I'm really looking forward to these lawsuits going through the courts. It's going to take a lot. That's
what I was going to ask. This is a sluggish process. So what can we expect out of that?
Well, it really depends. But with Rocco Galati's lawsuit, it's a huge case, right? Like he's a wealth of experience, and he has a lot of experts, and he is going to, I think, demonstrate to the courts that, one, the PCR test is faulty and should not be used, cannot be relied upon. And so once you prove that, then the whole thing falls, because the whole lockdowns have been based on that, right? And that's what other lawyers in other jurisdictions are doing as well.
And that's already been ruled in, I think it's a court Portugal. In Lisbon, Portugal, at the appellate court, the appeals court, ruled that I believe it was 40 cycles, it's 90 up to 97% false positive. So they ruled that because of that unreliability, it is unconstitutional to use that to incarcerate or for lockdown.
Even Fauci, out of his own mouth, says that anything at 36, 37, 38.
Well, over 30 in fact.
I can't speak
I think he
to
said
that.
35 at least.
He said that what I heard is, what I remember hearing was he said 36. He said that it's all dead nucleotides, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't even depend on it. And then we had heard that the Alberta cycle rate was 41.
Yeah. Well,
That's
it's
what I
over
was just
35.
saying. 35 I heard first, and then I just heard Jason Kenney refer to 41.
Well,
but the recording got cut off, so I don't know what
But
he's
then
going to say about it.
there's the Drawston.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the Drawston
Yes,
paper, right?
and the lawsuit.
Yeah, and the lawsuit. And so they were saying at 35 cycles that the test is only 3% accurate.
Yeah.
Like in their own literature.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you know, we could do, like, there's lots of
Yeah.
information about this. So
Well, there's lots of information.
But one
Yeah.
thing, because you guys are both like educated people, engineer, lawyer, right? And you have colleagues and everything. But there seems to be a real, why aren't people open to this conversation? Like educated people. You would think that if you bring some data, you'd be willing to look at the data, right? So what do you think's really going on? Why people aren't actually, like, you go, here, just have a look at the data, make your own decision, and they just won't.
Well, I think that's psychological. Like, that's why I say the only thing that's required to understand this is willingness, basic reading comprehension,
Mhm.
and control of your cognitive dissonance. So in that case, those people are not willing because they do not have control of their cognitive dissonance. They're not willing to understand. They have a vested interest in not knowing this information.
Yeah.
And that vested interest is their faith in the media, their faith in government, their faith in healthcare.
Well, I do a lot of work with like identity consciousness, right? So how do you self-identify with yourself, and who would you be without that story, kind of stuff? And it seems to me that there's one of the biggest threats is for someone to find out that everything that they believed in to become who they are was a lie or was wrong or something, whatever the, like, not to over dramatize it, right? And so I'm just interested in your guys' feedback about what do you think would take to have someone be open to that willingness, be open to the idea that you're allowing your cognitive dissonance and cognitive bias to sway.
So I think from my experience, and I'm really open about this on all forums and throughout, like I am a recovering alcoholic, and I've been sober for almost 11 years in January. And one thing that 12-step program taught me that I really believe in is that, pain is the touchstone for change, right? And normally I don't think people, first of all, betrayal is a really big thing. And whether it happens with your spouse or with a child, with your employer or with the government. And we're so used to believing what it is that we hear, because we're very trusting. And especially in North America, where we really haven't, we've been very fortunate. We don't have refugee camps. We don't have civil war. We haven't had any of this. So we have lived a very sheltered life. But there's pockets of tragedy and despair. I mean, that's why we come to Earth, is to experience this, right? And then hopefully relearn why we're here. And part of that story is the failure. I don't think people, for whatever reason, I think we've gotten comfortable in our life and complacent, but people who have actually hit a certain rock bottom, like myself, where you can only go up, really contemplate things. And this can happen with like a diagnosis of illness, or facing imminent death, or having a near-death experience, or whatever, bankruptcy, whatever it is, right? That has divorce, whatever it is that has shaken your belief system. You have a choice at that point. You can either continue to do what you've always done to get the same result, or you can make a different choice. And I really think these same principles play into the psychology of what is happening now, because and the reason why I think that there is that cognitive dissonance is because it hasn't gotten bad enough yet. People see the mask as it's no big deal. I'm actually helping somebody. You're killing my grandmother, don't you know, if you don't wear it. And, you know, they're not thinking logically about it because they feel good about what they're doing. And I don't think that these people are bad people. I think that these people are just, you know, wanting to do the right thing. But I think as time goes on and this gets worse and the lockdowns go for longer and the food supply chain potentially gets shut off or the military comes in to force vaccinate or a two-class system appears to be put in place, which is very much on the horizon. They're talking about vaccine passports already, so that, you know, if I choose not to get a vaccine, I'm not going to be able to go to the movies, fly on an airplane, go into some grocery stores, probably, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's really going to fragment our society, right? And so that's my unscientific understanding of why I think people are not there yet. Right? It's not bad enough yet. And as it gets worse, I'm hoping that people will start to really see the inconsistencies and arbitrariness of all of this. And so, but, you know, time will tell. But I do think that is, I've seen a lot of evidence in my life to support how I believe, not only in my own personal experience, but also with people like my colleagues that have thought something is kind of what, you know, they think something is whatever, but now they're just like, this is absolute bullshit. What is going on here? Right? And so, and that's taken 9 months to get to, right?
Where I think all of in the room called this on day one, right? I think we knew that this was just an obvious creation for control.
Well, whenever my experience, and based on what we've researched and et cetera, when you have a coordinated message like the media was spitting out, like the CNNs, the, you know, BBCs, all the rest of it, CTVs, all of them, all across the world, that should be if the hair on your back is not standing up or flags aren't being raised, then they should. Yeah.
Same words, same little catchphrases all around the world.
Our bylaws are also have the same language as well. If, like, Mike was looking at different bylaws, the mask bylaws in different jurisdictions, and they all seem to have very similar wording.
Wherever there's a constitution, whatever countries have a constitution, the wording is very, very similar.
And don't you find it interesting about these masks as well? Like, one of the things that Lawyers for Truth has done is we've created a poster. It's called Respect Poster, and it's designed for businesses who are choosing to honor the mask exemption, because that has been lost in all of this. The governments don't want to tell you this. And certainly Dr. Dina Henshaw doesn't want to say anything about this in public, but both the City of Calgary mask bylaw and the CMOH 42-2020 order, which is the most recent order, it provides, I think it's at section 27 or 23 or something like that. Anyway, don't have it.
We can put that in the show notes.
We can put that in the show notes. They provide exemptions. Yeah. And this is not being adhered to. But what is really scary?
No law can break the law, correct?
Well, get this. And this is one of the things that, you know, I'm really heartbroken about, or really disturbed about. I went to court the other day, last week. I was representing a client in provincial court, and I went, you know, this lockdown hadn't really happened yet. It was, you know, we had notice of it, but anyway, got through the front doors and immediately asked for a mask. The long story short is that the courts have mandated the mask be worn in all public areas throughout the courthouse. And I reminded the sheriffs, 4 of them, who came to talk to me, because I asserted my mask exemption. I said, did you read the order? This is not what the order says. The order provides for exemptions. Well, no, and this is what the Calgary Court Center has. That's their policy. You have to wear a mask wherever, notwithstanding your exemption, anything. And for me, I'm going to be following up with the Chief Justices, because I don't understand that. I don't understand when there is an exemption built right into the order, why it is not being adhered
Of course,
to.
the place of justice not providing justice.
That makes it sound a lot like the courthouse is not a public entity, it's a private entity if they can make their own policy and not have to follow provincial regulation.
Well, we all have what's called human rights. So
Yeah.
regardless of whether it's public or private, under the human rights legislation in Canada, we all have inalienable rights. These rights we have them as human beings when we're born, right? So, what these human rights legislation does is it codifies certain things, like being discriminated against for health, religion, those typical things that we've all heard that the Charter protects and that our Alberta Human Rights Code protects. But the thing is, it's an exhaustive list. Like it is, like that's just not what the government has. Oh, thank you for giving me these rights, please. Like that is the big thing of bullshit ever.
Yeah, government doesn't give you the rights.
No,
we have these rights.
Yes.
And so to think and that's where the education system and all of this has really, I think, bunged everything up too, because we've just kind of all accepted that, well, this is how it is and this is what this law allows me to do, but nobody's actually thinking about it anymore. Like there's the level of discernment is like zero,
and the level of cynicism is like way up. Like I know some people, very good people from friends, people I've known for a long time, and they'll say something, well, you think you have rights, but then they put out this meme of like Sitting Bull who says, we have obligations, right? Obligations for the community and stuff like this. And so it's this shame-based logicking, if you want, which is not fact-based, it's just emotion-based, right? And then so there's these defamations of other people that just want to ask more and more questions around it.
Rather than discerning, are you sick beside me? Should I? Is this, there's no discerning. Why would we mask the bulk of the population who are healthy? Why would we not allow people who are healthy to go to their businesses and serve their customers? Why are we
create the economy that can help actually take care of somebody who's in much need? Right?
Yeah. Yes.
And this whole idea of this has got to be the only, like, first of all, just as a little piece of interesting information, in the WHO's own literature, pandemic used to be, before 2011, be described as widespread death and disease, right? And then they changed it for some reason in 2011, and now it just says something like widespread influenza-like symptoms, or something like this.
Well, they call
that's the description. They did, and then just go look it up. Go 2000. Just type in 2001, or 2011. Sorry.
If they still have, if they're even removing things.
Well, I did actually go find it and read it myself. But where was I going? So this whole idea is like, this is the only pandemic type of thing. Like I think probably during the Spanish flu, you probably like stuck your head out and there were like people sick. And right?
It was obvious.
It was obvious
that people would die with black or blood-colored fluid from their mouth and nose.
Right.
So it was painfully obvious.
Yet, I've asked probably, 100 people, do you know anybody? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
Right. And
look at, we're not, everybody, any skeptic or, COVID lover is going to say, well, these guys, they we want to kill everybody. No, we don't, right? And that's not what this is about.
Absolutely
at all.
not.
We only want to kill 0.26% of the population.
Well,
because isn't the survival rate, according to the CDC, 99.74%?
Exactly.
But to that point, this has already been fought out in course twice with the Ontario Nurses Association versus the governing body that runs the hospital. In 2015, they had a policy that was called mask or vaccinate. So during influenza season, for 6 months of the year, they wanted healthy nurses to wear masks or vaccinate. And in 2015, they presented all of this data and won the court case. In 2000,
what do you mean? Like, how did they win it? Like, explain how they won
they
it.
won it that they don't have to wear a mask and they don't have to be
I heard
vaccinated.
that backwards myself.
Yeah.
So in 2018, they had this court case again. Because a number of hospitals were not following the first court ruling. And so the arbitrator in the second court case stated that clearly masks do not work. And the Ontario Nurses Association, their mandate is to help others, is to help heal people. This is their entire modus operandi.
Mm-hmm.
It's their, their raison d'etre. So this idea that people that don't want to wear masks or don't want to get vaccinated want to hurt people is just ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
And they've won that twice in recent history. So going down, so you've been doing a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
So what else are you finding? What, like, in a nutshell, if you were to like give your, and it's a big nutshell, but your opinion from your research, your educated opinion from your willingness to go deep and look at the research, what are you finding? What, if the mask, if is there a pandemic? Is there not? Why the mask? Why not? What about the coming vaccinations? Why the lockdowns? What is your research showing for you?
Well, in 1918, this was all experimented with. At the time, maybe you could say that they thought it might work. I don't know. But they did masks. Many cities had where you couldn't be in public without one. Outdoor, indoor, didn't matter. And they also did lockdown, very, very strict lockdown. There was, I think, 3 towns in Manitoba that had the town was on lockdown. The RCMP guarded roads in and out. No one could get in or out of the town. The Canadian Pacific Railway would not stop. And if they did stop, no person could get on or off the train. And in the end, the paper writes, and it's a CDC document. They write there that it's not available publicly. You have to go and you have to search it in a specific way.
We can find it for you.
Oh,
And I have it
okay.
printed
That'd be great.
off.
Okay.
It's in the CDC stacks. So the stuff that's inconvenient truth now has been shadow banned or publicly whatever shamed. But I'd heard this paper referenced in another paper, and then I couldn't find it. So I got quite motivated to find this paper to see what was in it. And it quotes much from Canada, a lot. We had very, very strict lockdowns, and we had very, very strict mask laws. And it's even in Alberta, I believe it was at the time a similar role to Henshaw, said that by the time the mask bylaw was taken down, it was heavily ridiculed because it never worked, and cases like it just didn't work.
Do you know what the duration was of that masking and lockdown?
Well, it different across different jurisdictions. Some of them went on from 1918 to 20 or 1918 to 1920. So some of them, some jurisdictions were over a year for sure.
Oh, okay.
So, and what was the overall percentage death rate?
Oh, it was huge. It was high. There was millions died. Like it would, and it was painfully obvious. It was super obvious. Everyone knew someone, and in towns that were in lockdown, people knew people that died. Like there was no avoiding it. And it was H1N1, which we still have. It's still one of our major flus. We still have H1N1. And so coronavirus, this woohoo flu, is just the newest coronavirus to the coronavirus family. I think there's somewhere around 8 of them now. So, this is not going to go away. The only thing that is going to change is that people are going to learn the truth. They're going to see that masks don't work. They're going to see that lockdowns don't work. And they can see that in history. They could see that in peer-reviewed science. And then going forward, like Katherine was mentioning this vaccine passport, I actually think it's kind of funny, and comedians are going to have a great time with it, because Pfizer is saying that the vaccine they don't even know if it's going to be able to stop infection. Yeah. So it's ridiculous.
It's night.
Right.
I posted a meme today. She's getting like a little cartoon getting a shot. So after this, I have to wear a mask. No, you'll still have to wear a mask. Oh, and I won't be no, you're just going to get. I won't have to. And it's like, no, you'll still have to do everything. So she goes, why? So why am I doing this again? Oh, I'm just following orders. So basically, Ray says it all.
But you could have an ivermectin passport. So ivermectin, obviously you're aware, has been shown to kill or destroy live virus. So literally in
100% of the time.
100% of the time, and it works very, very fast acting. So I mean, you could have an idea that under the same kind of draconian measures, but you could have draconian measures that actually worked, and that would be
free people,
and that would be ivermectin.
Something I like, because I'm one of those people who are willing to face my own cognitive dissonance. Like, it's uncomfortable to look at this stuff, right? Now, the ones that criticize people like us, I guess, are people who have their own data, but they won't look at the other side of the data, like the data that we're looking at typically. So, but we're looking at both sides, and we want to have a conversation about it, but very few people are having that conversation. One of the conversations that, speaking of the pain, that the pain threshold hasn't got high enough for people to want change, because you're right, people they only change one of two ways. One is toward growth, and there's a very, very small percentage of people who just want to see what they're capable of. And the rest of the population, which is probably 95 plus, only changes when
they're forced
to move away from pain.
Exactly, to move away from a pain, right? And unfortunately, with this vaccine, something that I've been looking into is this idea that it's called various different things, but even Dr. Peter Hotez, who is Mr. Vaccinate Everybody, who is touting caution to Congress, for instance, in this interview, when he's saying that there's something we don't understand about coronavirus vaccines. And one of the things, and it's been called vaccine-derived autoimmune enhancement or something like this, right? And the premise is that you give somebody a vaccine of specifically of coronavirus is the worst one. Then what ends up happening is it seems to work until they get challenged by the actual virus, right? Mm-hmm. And when that happens, some weird thing happens, and Dr. Peter Hotez ends up saying, we don't exactly know what happened, but they end up basically
dying.
Like all the animal studies, they died or got horribly sick, and so all the coronavirus vaccines in the past have never gotten to human trials because all the animals died. But this time they're skipping the animals, right? Which is kind of a critical step, I would think. And I would think you got to have some kind of serious cognitive dissonance inside to know that information is available for you to actually look at, so you can at least make an informed choice, and then go plunge that thing in your arm to see if whether or not you're going to have that cytokine storm that could make you sick. And if more people, and if that happens with a lot of people widespread,
well, at that point,
we would have a pandemic.
Too late, right? Yeah, and so the why is, I think, a really important thing to talk about, and I think that's where a lot of people get lost, or they just can't go down that road because it's not fun, and it will shake your entire world. Like everything that you knew or thought to know to be true, you need to question, and people don't like that at all, and so that's why I think that there's an automatic, like, well, you're a conspiracy theorist and tinfoil hat, and this has been debunked or fact checked.
Debunked, but not disproved.
Where do you think could be is there a middle ground space where people can go, do you think, to start looking, that might want to look somewhere but can't go down that deep hole into the cabal and the whatever, the world domination? I mean, one world government is not a term that you have to look for. I mean, governments are talking about it, right? They're talking about Agenda 2030.
But it's interesting,
where do we go?
Well, on the data side, like if you want like actual research, you can't use normal search engine. You got to go to DuckDuckGo, something that's not
or Swiss cows,
something that's not AIing you onto another site. And then the first word is PubMed. So just PUBMED, which is the National Library of Health, but it'll pull journals from all over the planet. And then type your topic in. And then if you're still not getting enough hits on PubMed, then put PubMed at the front and the back with your search, what you want to know about in the middle. And then if you only want to look at PCR, or not PCR, but random controlled trials, so you just want the best of the science, then that would be individuals. And then if you want, okay, what if you collated those? Then that's called a systematic review. And so that's at the top. That's the best
Oh, right. We never got to that.
data
Okay,
analysis.
systematic review. Okay.
And then the tippy top would be a meta-analysis. So meta-analysis will look at multiple systematic reviews of the randomized controlled trials, and then they will comment and relate that information as it would pertain to the lesser quality data, like a clinical study or an observational study. So, it's not difficult to get the information at all.
And what we're going to try to do on Lawyers for Truth, because we just started this like literally 2 weeks ago, and I think what our goal is because we want to be a resource for this sort of like one-stop shop. Like this is the PCR page, so we're going to do here are the links that we find relevant. Always with the disclaimer that you need like look for yourself, and any truther or person who in this community who's seeking will always recommend like do your own research. Like like we don't.
Yeah. And I don't need to do my own research. If it was true, it would be on CBC.
And so that's really frustrating for us. So we're working to make that website as filled with information as possible.
What do you have a timeline? Do you have a vision where you want to get a bulk of the, there's always going to be new information coming.
Yeah, we're really gonna try to have it for the beginning of January, like a lot of more information and in-depth.
Okay, right.
A lot of the data.
But it's already out there already, guys. Like it really is
nice to have that central place, though, right? For people are lazy. People, can you show me? And like, it's not my job to do your research. You're not even open to the idea of what I said. I'm certainly not going to go give you a list of resources and go figure that out for you.
Yeah.
Right. But
if you
maybe if I could say, go to this one website.
Well, if you scroll through the Lawyers for Truth Facebook page and go down through all the posts. Yeah. And then if there's a particular topic that you're interested in, like there's a post about the Ontario Nurses Association and their law case. Okay. And then in the links below that, in the comments, will be a bunch of other supporting documents or data. Okay. So it's one-stop shopping for existing and new law.
And don't be deterred by the fact check notice or this is a COVID article or whatever. Like,
click through it.
Click through
it. They're all over my page.
Exactly, right? And so, and then alternative to YouTube would be BitChute, and
we have to like the viewer has to get to the place where they understand that all of that notice, all that means is that you are not following either codified or information from the CDC or the WHO. But their information has been wrong on so many occasions.
And it just keeps switching sides, right?
So this sort of fact check notification is really
it is political.
It's totally political.
You know what? There's a great episode of The High Wire where they do an expose on the fact checking. Actually, I think fact checking is it in Social Dilemma as well?
James Corbett. No, I don't know. James Corbett talks about the fact checkers and who checks the fact checkers.
Well, in fact, there's Candace Owens in the States is suing Facebook and the fact checkers. I don't know if it's Facebook, but I know that she's suing the fact checkers.
I heard Facebook, and also ICANN, which is Del Bigtree's nonprofit. They are also suing.
Yeah. So this is happening, right? Like we are gaining some momentum, but it is a slow process, right? And it has to, like I was explaining earlier. Courts are a deterrent in this weird. We look at the courts as like this place where justice happens, and certainly it didn't happen the day that I was in the lobby for myself, and I hope that is rectified because I know that, and I hope that the judges really listen to these cases and really think long and hard about it and really turn their attention to the data that they're going to be presented, because there is nothing reasonable about the limits that they are doing right now.
Do you have advice for somebody faced with a fine for congregating with their family over Christmas?
Well, we're looking at the fine as come and get us. Like do whatever you need to do, because So when you get a fine, what I'm hearing now, I don't have proof, but what I'm hearing in the community is that the Crown is dropping these cases these tickets once they're being challenged. So your first step would be to, first of all, cooperate with the police, cooperate with the bylaw officer. There's no point in, getting into a fight with somebody, unless, and I get it. Like, look, I've lost my cool as well with people many times, but the advice would be just to give the information that you need to give, get your ticket, and at that point you would file declare whether or not you're guilty. So if you don't believe you're guilty, and you have to look at the ticket as well to understand under what infraction, right? But you would state that you're not guilty if you believe that to be the case. And then you either would show up at your court date to enter that plea. At that point, you would notify the Crown, likely in writing, that you are going to make a constitutional challenge to this, and also you want the disclosure from the Crown so that you understand the case that they have against you.
And
right?
The full disclosure.
And we'll see what happens. But from what I'm hearing is that those cases they're being dropped, right? And so,
well, but what about this new thing there was a lawyer who walked through some new bill here in Alberta where they are basically disposing and dispensing of the rule of law, and that officers are now, I don't know if this has been completely ratified yet. I think it has been. But officers, when they write the ticket, it's as if they were under oath, and then you can't actually take these things to a court. Have you heard this?
I haven't heard anything about that.
I'll see if I can find this lawyer. He goes and he went right through the whole thing, and he goes, you have to understand what this means. This means is you cannot use the rule of law and your own due process to actually do this, and they're just going to basically keep all of that traffic stuff out of the courts.
Did you have a comment to that?
Yeah, I heard it. I think that's a dark interpretation, and maybe that's where it goes. So it's a presumption of guilt. But in that case, then when you fight a ticket, you would be appealing the ruling of your guilt.
But I think he even said they took the appeal.
Find it. We'll find it. We'll get that in the notes. We'll get that in the notes. From another legal perspective, do you see Nuremberg-style trials occurring after this? There are a lot of people that, in my opinion, very obviously are guilty of crimes against humanity. I'm sorry, when we're genociding the elderly, when we're not resuscitating people that did not have do not resuscitate orders, when we're, even what we're doing to our children in schools, and just, do you see eventually people being tried for, there's a lot of people that have to comply to make this actually happen?
Yeah, and I think eventually, yes. I think once the full scope of, see, what's interesting, and what other lawyers who do this, these constitutional challenges for a living. I don't practice in the area of constitutional law, but oftentimes their experience shows is that they initiate a lawsuit such as the one that Galati has going in Ontario, which is going to be that's a big one. There's an application being heard on the 21st of December, brought by the JC, that's being litigated by the JCCF, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms in Calgary. And part of what the relief that they're seeking is a declaration that Dina Henshaw doesn't have any powers, that the government has inappropriately and unconstitutionally what's the word I'm looking for?
Abdicated.
Well, given allowed Dina Henshaw that office to an unelected official to make these orders, right? And so that's one of the things that they're doing. Rocco Galati's lawsuit is much greater than that, but they all kind of stem under the same principles, right? And because the JCCF is also bringing, the constitutional challenges into it as well. And so what we're going to see is that once these are decided, and I think that we're going to be really successful, is that there's going to be a lot of explaining to do. But what happens, and what I was getting to, is that oftentimes when the governments are challenged like this, through the appeal process, as it makes its way, meanders its way up the court system through to the Supreme Court of Canada, the government will change their laws, right? I'm hoping that these cases go straight, at least to the Supreme Court, regardless of whether or not the law has changed, because I know these lawyers are adamant that these rights are not only being violated, but exactly as you mentioned, like negligence, criminal negligence, and I think that the necessary mens rea is there potentially, that this was intentional. And this has been something, and this is the why.
Okay, let's talk about the
why.
The
why is the Great Reset, and the why is instituting the New World Order government, and which is in effect fascism, communism.
But this is a conspiracy theory. Where are you getting these?
And it's not. It's right on the World Health Organization website.
World Economic
World Economic Forum. Yeah. They're all linked. And when you go down the rabbit hole of actually spending time on the World Economic Forum and read anything by Klaus Schwab, and Jason Kenney even admits it, in one of his public addresses a couple of weeks ago. There is a plan. Justin Trudeau was in front of the UN a couple of months ago. That video is circulated wildly across the internet, where he uses the language, Great Reset, Build Back Better. This is, the fourth industrial revolution. All of these things are used in the language that the World Economic Forum is putting out. And this isn't a conspiracy. We do know this. And the problem is that these government officials are puppets. It doesn't matter. They're puppets to a bigger agenda, and they get their marching orders from somebody above them that we probably have never even heard of before. And, whether they're bought off, whether they're MK Ultra, whether they're threatened, whether they're willing participants, I think you got a mixed bag of all of that stuff. And unfortunately, through the, we've been taught as a society, the gladiators, watch the gladiators, watch this football game over here and this, star over there, shaking her ass and all the rest of this stuff. Right? Look over here, get Botox. You don't have enough, get more shit, getting more dead. Forget about what's going on over here. Yeah. And so while we've been so busy, enamored with, making ourselves feel better by injectables or whatever else we're doing, or the football team that we're watching, they've been up to their agenda. And so this shouldn't come as any surprise. And anybody who spends literally 15 minutes on the internet is gonna see this.
So what is your understanding of the Great Reset? What is the end goal?
I think the end goal is depopulation. I think the end goal is the destruction of the economy in the world as we know it. I think that it is going to, and this is a really dark timeline, but there's something called the Georgia Guidestones.
So I was just going to say.
And it's right, they're how tall are they?
They're 20 feet tall.
20 feet tall. They sit in the middle of Georgia, and they're written stone templates. And on the templates, they show that the goal for the ideal population for the world is 500 million. That's a huge number from 7 however many billion are on this planet right now, notwithstanding the fact that Bill Gates and other people of his ilk readily talk about this. He's been heard in TED Talks, and they say this right out loud. And I don't know if the filter just goes, oh, that's interesting. He doesn't really mean that.
Yeah.
That's what they'll never do. Just because it says it, they're not going to actually do it.
They're actually doing it, right? And, when enough, I don't have the smoking gun evidence, but when I look around, and I've been researching this for 7 or 8 years, and I look at a lot of different information from different sources confirming, some right out of the horse's mouth, right off the World Economic website, that's telling us this information. It's what other conclusion can you draw?
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm pretty much seeing what you're seeing.
Why do you shut down all the small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses? Why do you remove people from being able to socially interact with each other?
With
Why
a
do you
99.7
exactly?
But let's bring these questions up, more of these
Absolutely.
questions, because this is really important for people to ask these questions. People aren't asking them. So why are we closing the business? Why are we not allowed to socially interact? What else?
Well, how can you justify not going to church but then standing in a line at Costco? You know, how do you justify that? How do you justify
flying in a plane?
Flying in a plane
Like this.
Exactly. Right? Face, mask to mask.
Mask to mask in a hermetically sealed vehicle.
Yeah.
Right?
Why? How can you justify putting your mask on when you get into the restaurant to walk 5 feet to your table and take the mask off?
Yeah.
Like what? Why can I? My kids have to be masked at school all day, but that we can go out for dinner and with friends or whatever, and they don't have to be masked, right? Like these rules don't make any sense. Yeah. But they're also designed because they want, like, look at the mask, the pictures. Okay. So we've created this mask, and I kind of got sidetracked from that. We created this respect poster, and it shows for businesses who want to honor the mask exemption and allow people the option of whether or not they're going to take control of their own sovereign being and declare their mask exemption and allow them to shop. We're encouraging them to put up this poster. And what we noticed about the City of Calgary poster is that, first of all, there's 3 faces. None of them have eyes, right?
Oh,
and they're all masked. And so, they're dehumanizing us, right? When I look around right now, when I go out, I don't even see people anymore. I see masks. Or things, entities that are just happen to be around me, right? And that is part of the psychological program, right? And to create dissension. So when you create dissension amongst people, it's divide and conquer. This is, these aren't new, theories. These are just what people do. Like, they're trying to reduce the amount of time that we get to talk about these things with people. They want to scare us with information that makes no sense whatsoever, and they're dehumanizing us with forced mask wearing.
Are you guys familiar with the Biderman's chart of coercion?
No.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
It's for anybody who's interested. It's called Biderman's chart of coercion, and actually, what it's about is how to torture people. Right? It's actually it was torture. It was like how do you torture somebody so they'll eventually tell you the truth and interrogate them.
But it basically goes through the steps. We won't go into the
details.
But it basically goes through the steps that we've been going through in terms of shop.
See if it looks
a little bit similar.
Go see if it's similar.
And then they give you a little bit, we're going to free things up. And they give you that, see, if we just do this, if we're just good little boys and girls, they're going to let us have Christmas. And then they take it away.
And notice the language around it, Henshaw and Nenshi, the shaming. This is your fault. Yeah. You guys aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're causing people to get sick, right? It's your fault. I don't know. When I go around, I'm never around people who also don't have a mask on. Yeah. Seriously.
Well, and it's interesting.
Yeah,
I call it the logic litmus test. I was having this discussion with a neighbor, and he kept saying these things. I wear a mask for my protection. I goes, well, let's just run that up the logic litmus test. I'm like, I go into the garage, I turn on the bandsaw, I throw in a mask, right? And I run the thing, because when I exhale, my mask wants to go out, and when I inhale, it wants to suck onto my face so I don't get sawdust in my face. I don't want to get that stuff in me. So the idea that if you want to make it psychologically, I wear it to protect you and not me, it's a piece of cloth, and it goes both directions.
Yeah. Well, how is that going to protect you 5 feet from the door of Earl's to the door?
100%. But this is the logic litmus test, right? And so, what I like doing is I like asking questions when I get into these conversations.
Yeah.
I'm not much of a broadcaster. I'm more of a one-on-one. Well, let's just talk about this then, right? And just the whole idea, let's just logic this through and see if it makes any sense, right?
We've lost the logic, the reason, the critical thinking, the common sense. and we just listen and do as we're told.
You know,
And I know Mike can, talk, because we've been looking at this for a long time as well, and as I know you have as well, but like it is about the destruction of the world as we know it.
Right.
Like going back to normal will never happen. Like that's not happening. Now there was stuff that needed to be changed with the normal anyway, right? Like, so this can be a really good opportunity too, right? I think if we approach it the right way, but we do need to acknowledge what the hell's going on here first
100%.
and see it for what it is, and then start to make the changes before it's too late. But and I don't know, when is it going to be too late?
Well, yeah. And how do you see us coming out of this? What are your
Well, you
thoughts?
have to, from my opinion, and Mike says this all the time as well, civil disobedience is not an option, like is not a choice. And like you have to assert your rights now, because there is not going to be a different time to do so, right? You have to assert your rights now. And that means don't wear the mask. That means assert your exemption, that you know your body better than anybody knows your body, right? And who's to say that this PCR test that we know is faulty, we're not allowed to see our doctors any longer. If we do it or Zoom meetings or whatever, they're not even part of the process of making a diagnosis any longer. Like, we need to take back our own autonomy, and civil disobedience is necessary. It just is.
It's a duty.
Yeah.
I think it's Gandhi says something like, civil disobedience is a duty when the government has become corrupt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember where we came across. I came across a quote that says, "It's immoral to obey an immoral law."
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
So, and
From both sides, to carry it out from, say, somebody who's carrying out orders, or from myself to follow the fact that I have to suppress my ability to get unencumbered air into my mouth and expel my toxins. That to me is my basic right as a human being on this
and
planet.
notwithstanding, like, as we've said multiple times this evening, 99.7% of people are going to survive. This is not a killer that is devastating the planet.
And those are inflated numbers.
Exactly.
Those are,
Exactly. Right.
That Deborah Birx on film said, we're taking really wide berth, what we're calling COVID.
Well, there's
deaths and all
something
these things.
circulating on the internet right now with the health minister or some sort of health person in Ontario who was hot mic'd, and just today. And then she's just like, she's like, I don't even read any. I just read whatever they write for me.
Oh, that's what somebody put that on my page today. It's like, I don't even know why I look at all these papers, right? I just read what I just say what they tell me to say anyway.
Exactly.
Right.
Isn't that amazing?
And also in Ontario, there's a headline that they're declaring anybody that was so-called diagnosed with COVID and it's a suicide, that suicide is a COVID death. It's not even a suicide.
Yeah.
Well, they have to hide those numbers now.
And the thing
I talked to a Foothills hospital because I wanted to know the protocols. Like, are they actually treating anyone, or is it literally like go home and chicken soup? Like, are they even suggesting that people take vitamins or hydroxychloroquine or anything?
Right.
Like, is there any protocol?
Right.
Are they even trying to help people?
Right.
Yeah, because Henshaw certainly won't say anything about that.
The woman I talked to got quite frustrated with me because she's like, well, it depends on how it presents. And I'm like, well, this is like a respiratory virus. What do you mean? Like, so I didn't understand. I'm like, what are you talking about, how it presents? And she went on to explain to me how this is presenting itself in some cases as respiratory, but in other cases as rashes, as gastrointestinal difficulties. So I would really like the Foothills Hospital to explain to me how a respiratory virus can cause a rash or a gastrointestinal challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's everything. So, and that's the thing. Where's the suggestion of creating health? It's all about protection, cut off, move away. It's not about, okay, it doesn't matter how anything's presenting. Some basic things like zinc and vitamin C and vitamin D are necessary for good, robust health, no matter what.
No matter what.
Right? And most people are deficient. Most people are deficient in nutrients, and most people are poisoned by toxins in their environment, by the drugs they're taking, by whatever else, by the stuff they're putting on their bodies every single day.
Yeah.
Well, that's the next question I have is, Are our hospitals even testing for vitamin C or blood vitamin C or blood vitamin D levels? Because that's a very simple thing to do.
It is a very simple
and
thing.
Then it's like so cheap that it wouldn't even matter.
And what is it? 80%, 80 some percent of people who have had, some kind of detrimental symptomology or whatever of what we're calling COVID have been vitamin D deficient.
Yeah.
There's
vast
a big
majority of them,
correlation with vitamin D status. And look where we are.
Yeah,
we are largely vitamin D deficient.
Exactly.
And then look at the people in the old folks' homes.
But why isn't Henshaw telling it? Like, why isn't she offering solutions? Why isn't she saying get a lot of rest, make sure you're taking all of your vitamins? Why?
Because it's not about health.
Well, exactly.
Right? How can it be about health when the only solution is this untested vaccine of like all this different stuff that's in it? And please find out what's in it before you decide whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, that has to be like a separate show.
That has to be a completely separate.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But you know what? It's, in my world, like I worked a lot with, the quantum, right? The idea of consciousness and stuff.
Yeah.
And so why are we wearing all these masks and stuff? And I want to invite the idea that one of the reasons why we want to wear masks is because we're terrified of actually looking inside of ourselves.
Mm.
So this is just an external collective experience of what's going on when people aren't taking control of, like, even an interest, a willingness to go past their own cognitive dissonance to find out why they're unhappy, why they're unhealthy, why they have no energy, why they don't, all of these things, all of these emotional things that we don't want to look at. And so what do? We'd rather just put our mask on.
Because they've kind of had a symbolic mask already on, and now they get to put that mask on. And for some people, I think they're more comfortable because they don't have to face anyone.
People like it.
You guys being in your respective professions, like do you see a lot of people wearing like a figure, a mask of styles, right? There's self-identity with.
That's what I was gonna say. Whatever. I've seen sequins.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean like when I'm talking about a figurative mask, not a literal mask, right? Yeah. So I'm talking about wearing a mask of I'm an engineer, I'm a lawyer, right? Yeah. And you connect and self-identify with that status thing, right?
Well, I wouldn't describe it as status. I would say what you're saying is 100% accurately true and easily observable. And so this is called professional conduct. So when you're engaged in business, even if you're making a deal, solving a fight between people, there's this idea that you're going to remain in professional conduct. So of course you're wearing a mask because you're not going to express all of your emotions, all of your past, all of your passions, your past, your history, your wants. That's not professional. You are there to perform a professional duty and you will do it in professional standard.
But I get that. Like I understand professional role, professional conduct, that kind of stuff. And in your scope of practice, these types of things. But what I'm talking about is when we are
I think I get what you're saying. I think
not like I'm driven to want to have the status of being Dr. So-and-so.
Okay. And who talks about this, and you guys will appreciate this, is David Icke, right?
Yeah.
David Icke, for all the people that he's like the king of tinfoil hat of the world. Yeah. And
it hasn't been proven wrong yet.
Hasn't been proven wrong yet, but whatever, and
he's been debunked.
He's been debunked, but not disproved.
Yeah, exactly. But I really like what he has to say, and he actually has a show on Gaia.com where he talks about this quite a bit, and I think it's in his new book that I'm gonna get. The answer. And what he talks about is the idea of perception, right? And he goes into the whole notion of are we living in a simulated reality and all that stuff, which is quite a bit out there, but for some people. But at the same time, I really what really resonates with me is his ideas around perception, right? Because when you change your perception of things shift for you. Mm-hmm. And I think collectively we're suffering from like a dis-ease of unawareness generally, and our perception of how things are. It's like bad relationships that I've been, in, and I can think of it, I can relate to it like this. Like, I always wanted this like fantasy relationship, right? Like, I always got gifts and we never fought. The sex was great and all this shit, right? But those relationships were never even a fraction close to that reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yet I pushed for it and I fought for this relationship that never was that to begin with.
Right.
And so I think that we all get there at some point, I think, through pain, right?
Yeah.
I think that we all come to these self-realizations eventually that, okay, well, wait a second, I was delusional in my own perception of what I thought this was, even though it couldn't have been clear to me. So it's just one of those things that I think people are going to have to come and wake up to eventually on their own. But and I think that they will, but I think collectively it's gonna have to get a lot worse. Like
It will.
It has to get a lot worse, and it's unfortunate, but that seems to be how we learn on planet Earth, right?
Absolutely.
Like we learn through polarity, right? And the yin and yang. We don't know the good without the bad, and so we are measuring it otherwise, right? And so that's what this density is all about. It's about learning, the relearning of who we are as eternal, magnificent beings that are like limitless, right? And to allow our soul to ascend. And what's happening is a fight between good and evil. This is not about left or right or communism versus fascism versus democracy. It's not about that. It's about good and evil. And I just firmly believe that, and I feel that very deep in my heart, and I don't care what other people think. I mean, that's the other thing.
That's important.
I do not care what other people think.
And that's where more people need to be, because I 100% agree with you. So did you have a comment? So we're getting really on in time here.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you had a comment to that. And then afterwards, I just want to see if there's some couple things that haven't been addressed that you want to say before we're done. Okay. So I think you want to say
So Ike addresses that what you're saying. And he says, you are not your labels. You are all that ever was, is, and ever will be. And that's that quantum physics you're talking about, the quantum vacuum fluctuation.
Yeah. And it's like there's a lesson in a book called A Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
And A Course in Miracles, it says you're never upset for the reason you think. Right. So, before Sasha, I had many relationships and none of them seemed to work out. Right.
Yeah. And
it wasn't until I was like, well, wait a minute. There's only one common denominator here. That's it right here. And it wasn't until I went inside and started like sorting out the stuff did I ever have something like this. Like now we're gonna be 15 years in and it's sweet. And this is good. And I think it's not to be underestimated. Yes, we can do all these things. We can do the lawsuits and we can do the research and we can, not give a shit about whatever other people think of us and all this kind of stuff. But I honestly think that the real thing that's going to move the needle is when people really start learning the value about taking radical personal responsibility about.
Oh, I agree.
So we actually broadcast different things into the
and then
field,
we'll do all the other stuff because we'll be responsible. So we will take the time to research and we will take the time to say, no, you don't need to protect me. I'll take care of me. I'm good. You don't have to do, we'll stand up for that.
A few years ago, I was beginning to write this book and I trademarked this and all the rest of it. And it was called The Responsibility Quotient. And it's about exactly what you're talking about. And so I fully agree with what you're talking about. And it is about that personal responsibility, because even with this, what we find ourselves collectively in right now, we have to take some responsibility for it. We let this happen.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Public Health Act has been around since, I think, versions of it since the 2000s, for 20 years. If you read that thing, exactly. So, but in some of the recent legislation, it's about 20 years. So when I look at that legislation, I go, this is scary. All of this is freaking
It is terrifying.
scary.
It is so
and I was like, how the hell did this ever pass?
It needs to
So-
be repealed.
It needs to be repealed.
The whole
and
shittery.
yeah.
And it needs to be written
And
in
Kenny says he's
language.
going to do it.
Well, no, he says he's going to do some of it, but the thing is, Jason
Well,
Kenney.
you can't force vaccinate.
Well, yeah,
Kenny's doing the same thing a lot of politicians do that are good politicians. They say one thing and they
And
do
they get
precisely the exact opposite
Yeah.
while defending that they're protecting you by doing exactly the same thing.
And Jason
Fair.
Kenney has done it very brilliantly as well, because what he's done is he's offloaded it all onto Hinshaw, in my opinion.
Yep.
And he is saying, well, I don't want the lockdowns, everybody, but you guys all do. Like that's what the CTV polls are telling me. That's what everything else
Because we
is
all here
telling
watch
me.
CTV all the time. So the people that don't
But
want
isn't
them
he
are the
saying
ones they're
that?
But
polling.
if he was a good
Yeah.
politician, he has a duty to govern. That's his job. That's what we elected him to do. He's abdicated his job. He needs to be fired immediately. Because if he actually felt that way, he would have brought it back into the legislature, back onto the floor, and had a discussion.
Yeah,
Well, then let's talk about it, Kenny.
right.
Like
And
you
every
can't be a pretend dictator.
Right.
Like that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So
Fair
I
enough.
think thank you very much for having us on, and we will work with you and share the more information as our website grows, and admittedly we're behind the 8 ball too, because we saw this happening in March, and now we kind of were like, holy shit, this is actually going into full tilt.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I think the biggest message is too, I really love your message. Like I really love it is esoteric, it is spiritual, it's about learning who we are as people, it's about finding that strength of who we are as people and honoring that and trusting ourselves to understand and to promote our well-being, like as individuals, right, as human beings, and yes, and say no and be proud of it. And you know what, there are going to be consequences, and I don't know what they are, but you know what, it's not going to be fun or comfortable. we've been walking around out without a mask since the very beginning, and it's not fun.
But we're in the worst lockdown of the people wearing masks. That's what I don't think anyone really realizes.
Yeah.
We don't go anywhere.
I deal with this
Right.
mass discrimination every
Right.
day. The moment I leave my house to the
Yeah.
moment I get back, it's constant mass discrimination.
Yes.
And so like people are saying, oh, the maskers are doing it. Well, give me a break. The people who are not wearing masks, we're in the worst lockdown ever.
Totally.
Because we are
Agreed.
going
I never
out.
even thought about it that way. That is totally true, because it makes you not even want to go anywhere. It makes you
Yes.
not want to participate. It doesn't. Yeah, and it's so uncomfortable. And I get that.
Either
Sometimes I
that, or
just
we're all
pretend-
like Pepe Le Pew, right?
Well,
And you walk down, and everywhere you're walking, you're infecting everybody.
But you know what? We
It's
don't
so
go. We just
asinine.
don't go
It's
out
so
anymore.
asinine.
Like literally, we avoid them all at all costs. And
Yeah.
at Christmas, it's very difficult. But we shop online and get food delivered. We get, we don't do any other than go to work if we're allowed to. We don't go anywhere.
Well, then ask the people not wearing masks for medical reasons or otherwise. How many of them are willing to have a doctor or anyone shove a Q-tip up any orifice?
Right.
So if the whole problem here right now is these so-called cases, how can you blame people not wearing masks? People not wearing masks are probably not getting tested because they don't want anything shoved in their body that they
Right.
don't want shoved in their body.
Agreed. Right.
So,
So
you know,
they really need to
it's-
challenge the
It
narrative
really
here.
flipped truth on its head, and a lot of people are starting to see through it. And I think that is the whole goal. The goal is that we don't have to wait 5 or 6 years to fight this out in court. The goal is not that we don't wait 2 years until the destruction of our economy reaches the same magnitude of 1920.
Mm-hmm.
Like these things, we can still avoid them. We can still avoid this public policy disaster. And that's what the epidemic is. This is an epidemic of very purposefully designed public policy to destroy our current mode of life, to bring in this Klaus Schwab reset.
Right.
And it's a horrible truth, but it is truth.
Mhm.
And not believing it, I'm sorry for you people out there suffering cognitive dissonance, but not believing it does not make it less true.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Denying it
as a
doesn't make it
parent,
more
that's the
true.
thing that makes me.
I
It's just
know.
like our son is suffering, right? He's just like, I'm so done. One is that he just wants to go back to think about all the
He's
like
extremely
the
social.
Exactly. All the kids, they
Just
want to play hockey,
heartbreaking.
they want to see
Yes.
their cousins, they
People
want to
don't understand
be in
the
school.
psychological ramifications of what they're supporting in the long term on that psyche of that child.
Yeah.
Like when these kids who are, let's say 10 and under, when they become 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds, it's going to be
I think
really
a different spin on that. I'm very hopeful of that, because I think it'll be just like the 20s. And then they had to combat that again. But I think what comes out of the backside of this is a complete distrust of government, complete distrust of health officials.
Of enough people.
And it will be very, very healthy for our democracy, because there will be this idea that, no, you can't be trusted. You can't even be trusted with your own job, let alone someone else's health.
Fair.
Like, give me a break.
I like it.
And I think on the backside of this, it will be remembered. I mean, there's a reason it took 100 years before society would accept this bullshit.
Yeah.
Because there's about 100-year memory, it would seem.
There's
Interesting. I never thought of it that, because I'm more on the side of, okay, these are the formative years. We're building, the future adults now. You think the suicides are bad now? I keep thinking we're setting up the future suicides for the next generation. But I like your thinking better. Maybe if the truth is revealed in time for that there's resiliency being created and maybe a sense of fight and strength.
Well, we're not sheltering our son who's 11 from this information, right? So I actually am pretty bullish on how he's going to turn out with this, because he has feist, he's smart, he asks good questions, right? And he'll probably, I would like to think that he'll be one of those that will stand and say, no, this.
Well, any young kid that listens, I tell them for 5 minutes. If I have 5 minutes only, I say, well, this is why you should be in politics. Like, you need to be, so that this doesn't happen again to your generation. Yeah. And the only way this happens again is if people don't go into politics and stop it. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to create a whole new generation of politicians that will repeal the acts, that will ensure that human rights and the rule of law and the discussion in the houses of parliament and legislature cannot be overruled by any one individual ever, regardless.
Well, and
regardless of what the calamity is.
Yeah, there's more of us. There really are more of us than there are of them. And we just need to reclaim our power and just say no.
And that's the thing. If everybody would do it, that's like I said from the beginning, if everybody would just refuse and not comply, it would be done so fast. Don't get tested. Don't be worried about losing your job, because they're not going to fire you all. They can't fire the whole entire hospital staff. They can't fire all the lawyers. They can't fire all the engineers. No, exactly. Everybody just stop complying. Then we're done.
Well, and then we can actually make systems better. So if we actually want to reduce influenza and or woohoo flu, whatever, then we actually address it through the HVAC systems. You have to adequately filter the air. You have to adequately exchange
on the mechanical level. And then there's these things. Right?
Yeah.
This amazing, this beautiful system that came in, because one of the things that really got us started on this path around COVID and stuff, Sasha just had a freak out in the kitchen one day, and she was just so frustrated. She's like, people don't know how to take care of themselves, right? They don't, right?
They were so afraid immediately. I'm like, I wasn't afraid. Not for a second. No. Ever.
I know, never.
No, ever.
No.
I know.
Never.
I know.
Right? Yeah. You don't know what you put in your body. Like, you're not pharmaceutically deficient. You don't have a vaccine deficiency. We have these amazing abilities to bring our health into order, bring our consciousness into order, and all these things, and live as congruent in beings. And when we do that, we won't be susceptible to things like we are. But when we're sick in our mind, sick in our thinking, sick in our body, well, of course something comes in, tries to upgrade your system, and you don't have any resources to actually make it happen. So
this control system has been with us on this earth for thousands of years, right? And they've been doubling down for decades on this,
and they've never been able to do it.
Well, exactly. Right. And the thing is that there's no coincidence when you bring in the whole concept of atheism, right? When you try to completely remove any fragment of spirituality from the existence, right? Now, there's a lot of people who are religious and who believe in organized religion and all the rest of it. But I believe that, there's been a concerted effort to confuse the issue. No, there's no pattern, there's no future life, there's no soul, there's no, it's just whatever's between your ears and that's it, right? And I've always just refused to believe that. But there are a lot of people that do, right? And there's a lot of people who claim to be very smart, who will propagate that. But I think that has been a concerted effort to further detach us from our soul, right? And so it's all part of the mind control, and people need to look up MK Ultra, and they it's a real thing. It did happen. It was CIA sponsored. It occurred in Canada.
We're still
in
paying
Montreal.
for it. There's still lawsuits.
It's
curious that Justin Trudeau's father and
to...
Justin Trudeau's son, or Justin Trudeau and his father, both put media silences on these cases so that the general public doesn't get the fulsome story about Canadian government involvement with the CIA and the Montreal hospital.
So we all think that we're not susceptible to this, right? But we don't even really know. I think, and that's the other thing. Like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And it's really important. And I would challenge people: have a conversation with somebody about something that you normally wouldn't talk to about, right? So that means it will be out of your sphere of social sphere, circle, bubble, whatever.
Your cohort.
Have a conversation and ask, and really, and as Mike was saying earlier, have the willingness, like, just listen, and you don't even have to agree, and you can, but just have an open mind to hearing what they're actually saying and seeing if, and then think about it.
Like actual discourse, like,
yeah,
right?
Like,
we have opposing.
Whereas, like, when you don't just like hide behind your Facebook persona and go tell somebody to pound dirt, or that they're, you're horrible and want to kill everybody, right?
Who's really good at that is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan sits down and talks to across from anybody, right?
Yeah.
Agrees with them, disagrees with them, whatever. And
we've devolved into, we don't debate the issues anymore. We attack the person, right?
Yeah, that's exactly
and that has to stop.
But people could just treat this like hockey, and so you can have an Edmonton Oilers fan and a Calgary fan sit down, get in a huge argument back and forth. It gets all heated, and they're both passionate. And at the end of the day, they're glad they see each other. And that's partly why they are friends, is so they can have that heated debate and then walk out of the bar, slap each other in the back and say, it was great to see you. Yeah. And they do this every time they get together, is to fight about their opinions on hockey.
Yes.
So if we could learn to treat COVID like your favorite sports team, find someone who likes a different team and go have at her.
Right.
It's like Looney Tunes, like, what was it? Wile E. Coyote and the dog.
Totally.
Morning, George. Morning, Sam.
So closing comments. This is good. Anything? Last words. We've been well over 2 hours, I think. So we got to cut it down.
Last words is there's nothing to fear. The darkness has no defense against the light. So shine your light, shine a light, whatever that is, researching, sharing, whatever. Shine your light. The darkness has no defense for light.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you.
And civil disobedience, stand in your truth and know who you are. And there's nothing to apologize for. And there is nothing to fear. We are going to be okay.
Okay. And you're not alone. So if you're watching this or you're listening to this and you've been afraid, you don't agree with what's going on, but you don't like confrontation, you're not alone. And there are people out there that you can reach out to, that you are, or you might inspire somebody else to do the same thing when they say you without a mask. So whatever that may be for you, just try getting out of your comfort zone a little bit more and a little bit more, because we need you. We need you. The world needs you. And it's now. It's now. Now's the time. Nobody's holding a gun to your head right now telling you to wear that mask or get a vaccine. Yeah. And I don't know if that's going to be the case in the future. So kind of dark, but shine your light. How about that?
I would add, I think the first challenging conversation you should have is with yourself.
Yeah, I like that.
Challenge your own cognitive bias. Question what you're thinking. Have the guts to do that. Have the courage to. Have the wisdom to do that. Because smart isn't wisdom is not the inevitability of being smart.
Yeah, like a sick mind can't heal a sick mind. Like, I don't know what I don't know, and so and don't be afraid to get that second opinion, right, from a friend or a colleague, that because we all need help. We all do.
We do, and we need sounding boards, and we need but we have to be willing.
We have to be willing.
Really nice.
Okay, well, good. Thank you both so much for sharing your ideas and your thoughts and your research findings and everything. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
Okay.
That was
Thank you
fun.
very much.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome, guys.
All right, guys. That's another episode. See you next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye.